Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. What I want to cover today is a topic on how not to use some of these AI tools for education or learning purposes. What I want to go switch to here is something I saw over on Reddit, on the ChatGPT subreddit. Somebody's sharing a story about how their little sister has been using ChatGPT for some of their homework in elementary school. Now, I don't even want to unpack that because there's a whole lot of ramifications there and issues, but I really want to focus on specifically how this child, this kid, is apparently using ChatGPT, these AI tools, to do their schoolwork. So I'm going to step aside from the fact that, AI is probably going to be a part of the education system in many different places very soon, if not already. But apart from an institutional level, children are starting to get access to some of these tools, whether intentional or not, by their parents, and are using them for schoolwork. We've seen stories for sure about college students and high school students submitting their theses, the reports to their schools, to professors, their teachers, and they're using AI to write them for them and causing all kinds of controversy. And we're going to see where that goes and how that develops. But we're talking about kids at very young ages using AI tools. And what they're relaying here in the story is that their sibling is basically using ChatGPT just to answer the questions for them. What is this math problem? What is the answer to this? What's the answer to that? And so ultimately, they're not really doing the work. And of course, this is incredibly controversial, right? Because is this child actually learning anything? What do I think about all this? I mean, I think it's very worrisome, but also not very unpredictable, right? I mean, I think there's some universal truths here, especially with respect to how humans, how the human species, how we consistently throughout history try to find ways to reduce the amount of work it takes to do things. You can see this in the types of innovations that we've come up with as a species throughout history. They're all geared in some way, for the most part, to reduce work, whether that's manual labor or intellectual labor. And just look at like the wheel, the plow, the printing press, the cotton gin, steam engines, electricity, computers, on and on. There was a lot of work that it took to do something. Somebody invented something that made the work less. And if we look at what artificial intelligence is, AI, I mean, what is it? Might be the most significant invention or innovation that humankind has ever come up with. It might be the last. But I don't mean that in a melodramatic sense, but other than once having created AI, what is there left after that? Topic for a different day. But skipping the whole idea and the consequence of automation innovations, how often that leads to less work, and when there's less work needed, that very often leads to the reduction in jobs needed to do said work. At least in many cases throughout history, that joblessness, that reduction in work was replaced by different kinds of work, and hopefully more sophisticated, more meaningful, and more valuable work. But it is what I consider a universal truth that we as people, as creatures of habit, humans will find a way to do something easier in some way, shape, or form. So it's not surprising that people are looking to use AI to find ways to do some of their work, to do less work. And I have a prediction, which is really kind of already coming about, but it's a prediction that I'm not so important for coming up with. I think a lot of people thinking about AI have come to the same conclusion, which is AI will come to be a big component of education, and not even just institutional education, but individual learning. In a previous video and article, wrote about how there's a school in Arizona in the United States, a charter school, which is developing an AI-centric curriculum for its students. That's interesting. There's some things to be maybe worried about with that. There's some things that are rather novel and interesting. Regardless of that, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, it is definitely my opinion that we're going to see AI become a very central component of education going forward. How long it takes for that to happen, depending on where you live and what part of the world, it's going to be different, but it's going to happen. And I also think that for people who desire, a completely kind of human and person driven education, that's probably going to become more expensive. And sadly to say, I think it's entirely possible that could become something that is attainable for only those of having more financial means. I hope that's not the case, but I think there's really a possibility for that. But there you go. I think, institutional education, but also from an individual learning standpoint, AI tools are going to be a big piece of that. There's a lot of applications, apps, tools, and things we have available to us now. We're going to see those probably rapidly develop to be more sophisticated and have more AI components in them. You think things like for learning languages like Duolingo, or learning and taking courses like Coursera or LinkedIn Learning, things like that. I have no doubt if they're already being worked on or they're already being deployed, but they're going to all have significant AI components to them because there's a lot of ways, if you just really think at it from a very even keel standpoint, there's a lot of ways that artificial intelligence can enhance the capability for those tools to help you learn new subjects. But there's a caveat to that, and there's kind of a problem, right? So if you take all of the work out of the learning process or the activity in general, there's no growth or learning that will actually occur. I mean, you need to actually try and solve the problem that you're trying to learn, whether it's learning a new language, trying to figure out a math problem, how to spell a word or something like that. You need to actually go through that. I mean, I don't have a PhD in educational pedagogy and processes, but I think that's a pretty fair statement to say or to make, which rather is if you want to actually learn it, you need to try and solve it yourself. You need to go through the process. Then the neurons in your brain, the synapses, it can make those connections, and then you build up those connections over time, and you know the thing, the answer, it. And if you're not doing the work yourself to do it, to solve it, that doesn't really occur. And essentially, in this particular scenario, what we're talking about here is what this person's student, sister, or student in school is doing. Like their brain is actually just functioning as like a pass-through of this knowledge. They're being asked a question, they're seeking out a tool that can just find the answer for them, and they're passing that information through, in and out, into the homework paper, right? Like there's no learning happening there, and that's unfortunate because where are they going to be? And I'll get to that in a moment. There's a consequence of a whole generation of young people essentially becoming further dependent on technology. Now, I say that as I'm sitting in front of a computer and I have all these tools and microphones and technological aids and things like that, and I work at my computer all day. I get that. The irony's not lost on me, but that's kind of a function of how our economy and societies work using technology. But I mean specifically when it comes to education and knowing things and knowing how to do things. This kind of idea that the information is just passing through the brain into the answer. What is the purpose of the human, a person being involved in that? There's no learning and there's no contextual value being added to that exchange of information. Consequently, if you become entirely dependent on, let's say, the AI tool to help you know what the answer is to a problem, if all of a sudden that AI tool is no longer available to you for one reason or another, maybe ChatGPT goes down. It has several times over the last month or so it can happen, right? If you become utterly dependent on that tool to provide you the answer and it's no longer there, you're going to be left in a really bad spot if you are in a situation where you do need to provide the answer. You do need to have that readily available. And sure, I mean, we can imagine scenarios when it's just simple math questions and things like, I can always just pull up a calculator or something like that. But we need to think about how these types of practices are being ingrained in young people's minds on how they go about solving problems. Like, I can just ask AI. That's problematic. And I think that is worrisome for how these younger generations develop. Not everybody will be like that. And I think the young people who grow up into adults who are not dependent on an AI tool to provide them the answer to every problem are probably going to have a leg up. They're going to have an advantage. Because at some point, at some time, there will be an occasion where you really need to show up and be able to demonstrate what you're capable of without AI. And those who cannot, they're going to be left behind. And it might not be a surprise. I can imagine scenarios in the future with educational institutions and things like that where the way that tests are taken and done, the way that information is tested in general, may be changed in the format to ensure that AI tools cannot be, you know, they can't just sneak that in and try and have it take the test for them. Whether that means going back to entire paper and pencil tests and things, or oral kind of dissertation style, we would go up and prepare a speech and presentation. Who knows, right? There's a lot of things that can happen there. But I believe it will happen in some way or shape or form to combat the probably growing issue of people becoming reliant on AI tools. But as I've said on different occasions, yes, there are things about artificial intelligence and how that's going to impact society and how society's utilizing it, which I think are problematic and cause me worry. With everything, I think, in this particular, there are good sides to it too. And I really think that we really need to earnestly look at, see, like, what are the pros and cons? How can AI benefit us? How can it be a detriment to us in society? So in this case, there is an alternative in how we use AI that can be beneficial, and using it as a learning tool, not an answer bot, but like a personal study guide. Like, you can use AI to, somebody's generative AI tools to create you a study guide, present it with a topic that you want to learn about, prepare me an outline of the key subject areas that I need to learn. Not to then turn around and present that as your material, but rather a study guide that's crafted specifically to the information you want to learn. And maybe that's not even for school. Maybe it's because there's a new subject you want to learn about, just because you like learning. It can help you learn those things. You keep in mind that these large language models, many of them are trained on what is closely approximating the entirety of human knowledge that is contained on, like, the internet and in digital spaces that can be incorporated into those language models to learn from. So, if you think, like, maybe the entirety of the internet and Wikipedia and stuff like that, there's a lot of information. You want to learn about history, you use these tools. Hey, write me a summary about it. I'd love to learn about this topic. And then you can also use it to ask questions. Maybe you don't have a professor of history available to you at your beck and call, but you would like to learn stuff at, like, that kind of level. All right? You can have what is closely approximated maybe a history professor at your fingertips that you can then engage with and ask questions and learn about a subject that you're interested in. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. For people like learning, this is pretty incredible. And I mean actually learning, not just having information provided to you that you can share. That's not what I mean. I mean learning so that you can know it and then internalize it and use it elsewhere, right? You can have the AI create you study guides or even quiz you. Think of it like an AI, a version of, like, flashcards or something like that. You can ask, like, ChatGPT, for example, like, hey, I'd like you to quiz me on this subject. Ask me questions about it and let me know if I get them wrong or right, and provide me hints in case I'm not sure what to do. Whatever. It can do that for you. Use advanced voice mode. Pretty compelling. So that is the alternative. Use it to enhance your learning so that you can more quickly and readily and thoroughly understand the material to use on your own in the future. And that is powerful. So I think that is the way these should be looked at. These tools should be looked at. The way to not use these AI tools is to have it do the thinking for you. That is not the answer. So my emphasis is, if you're going to use AI to help you in education, use it to help you learn so that you own the information. Own the information that you need to know and own it in your brain. So that's yours to take with you and use where you need it and when you need it. And maybe if there's other types of information that you don't need to use on a daily basis, it's just very mundane stuff you don't need to keep track of, whatever, it's not a concern. Yeah, maybe those are things that we kind of outsource parts of our brain to AI, right? But those stuffs that are critical that you want to know, maybe it's what you do in your daily job, your career, stuff like that. If you're engaging with people directly, presenting, doing sales, understand that stuff. Don't use AI as a crutch. Use it to enhance your learning process, so ultimately it's going to enhance your life. Well, that's what I think of the subject. Love to hear what you think. Leave a comment, subscribe. If you want to hear more news and topics about this type of stuff, be sure to follow. Thanks.